Welcome back. It's big board time again. There's the logo they changed from. They went from this one to that one. That one does look better, but I didn't mind these jerseys either. Today we're going to talk about the history of the Ottawa Senators meeting the current Ottawa Senators franchise. There's a lot of discussion about, well, shouldn't all of it meld together because there were the Senators before. In 1934, the original Ottawa Senators moved to St. Louis, became the St. Louis Eagles. And so, yeah, that was a time where there were financial losses in Ottawa. If any of this seems familiar, right? So that team did have 11 Stanley Cups. That original Ottawa Senators organization between 1903 and 1927 won the Stanley Cup 11 times. Those cups don't count to this franchise's total, but I do know that they have the banners for those Stanley Cups. And that's fine. I mean, those were won in that city by a team with the same name, but not the same franchise. So the same name, because that the example I always use is this: if the Vancouver Canucks change their name tomorrow to the Vancouver Millionaires, they can't retroactively put up the Vancouver Millionaires banner from when they won the Stanley Cup about 100 years ago. So that's the example I use. Now, for the all-time leading scorers with the Ottawa Senators, it's Daniel Alfredsson that leads the way. 1,178 games played, 426 goals, 682 assists, 1,108 points. The interesting thing is, I don't know that this list of top 10 scorers has changed from 3 years ago, when the last time was I did this video. Spezza, 686 games played, 251 goals, 436 assists, 687 points with the Sens. Erik Karlsson, 627 games, 126 goals, 392 assists, 618 points. Alexei Yashin, famously, 504 games played, 218 goals, 273 assists, 491 points. Wade Redden, 838 games played, 101 goals, 309 assists, 410 points. Of course, at one point in time, they had to choose between Redden and Chara. They played eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I would guess, and decided on Redden, which at the time looked like, it's probably a good idea. Chara made him regret it. Radek Bonk. I didn't mean for that to sound like James Bond, but we'll keep it in there. 689 games played, 152 goals, 247 assists, 399 points for one of the best names in the history of hockey. Marian Hossa first, 467 games, 188 goals, 202 assists, 390 points. Now Danny Heatley, 317 games, 180 goals, 182 assists, 362 points. Mike Fisher, top 10 for him, 675 games, 167 goals, 181 assists, 348 points. And then Mark Stone, 366 games with the Sens, 123 goals, 188 assists, 311 points. Became really appreciated after being traded to Vegas, and more eyeballs got to see him play and realized, hey, Stone's a pretty darn good player, which he's been the whole time. Their all-time wins leader is Craig Anderson, 202 wins for him. Patrick Lalime has 146. Ron Tugnut, 72. Ray Emery, 71. And Damian Rhodes with 65 is fifth on the list. Rhodes still being fifth on the list. They definitely need to solidify that goaltending position. It's been an issue for a while now. When they signed Matt Murray, that was supposed to solidify it, and it hasn't. So there's that. Now, retired numbers, there's 3. And this is where, again, the combined histories show up. You've got Chris Phillips, number 4, being retired. The number 8 of Frank Finnegan being retired. And the number 11 of Daniel Alfredsson being retired as well. So those are the 3 to this point. The argument can be made about retiring Spezza's number, of course. At some point in time, once they've retired Karlsson, Stone, maybe they get theirs retired too. Now, when we look at playoffs, what's interesting is there are a couple of teams that if you're a Sens fan, you don't want to see in the playoffs. Starting with Toronto. So 2000, they lose in the first round, 4-2 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. The following season, they lose in the first round again. This time, Toronto took them out in 4 straight. Which, even as a Sens fan, I was chuckling by the end of that series because it just looked like Ottawa had this major mental block when it came to Toronto. 2002, they lose in the second round against the Maple Leafs. They lost in that round in 7. 2003, they made it all the way to the conference finals because they didn't play Toronto that year. They lost in the conference finals in 7 against the New Jersey Devils. And 2004, they lost in the first round against the Toronto Maple Leafs in 7. So, Not trying to make this about Toronto, but I still think this is funny. That's 3 first-round losses they had to Toronto in 2000, 2001, 2004. Toronto's problem isn't that they can't get out of the first round. It's that they can't play Ottawa in the first round anymore. So 2006, this is where Toronto is no longer a power in the East on any level. It takes a while for Toronto to get back into that kind of status. 2006, the Sens lose in the second round in 5 to the Buffalo Sabres. 2007, they get all the way to the Stanley Cup final before they lose in 5 against a very overpowered Anaheim Ducks team. 2008, they lost in the first round against Pittsburgh in 4, and thus begins the "we don't like Pittsburgh either" phase of Ottawa Senators fandom. 2010, after missing the playoffs in 2009, they lose in the first round against Pittsburgh again, this time in 6. 2012, so make the playoffs every other year. They lost in the first round, this time in 7 games against the New York Rangers. Then in 2013, they lose in the second round in 5 against Pittsburgh. 2015, so they missed the playoffs for a year there. They lose in the first round against the Montreal Canadiens in 6. They missed the playoffs in 16. The last time they made the playoffs was 2017. They made it all the way to the conference finals before losing in 7 games against the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the Penguins' name shows up on the board 4 times. Toronto shows up on the board 4 times. If a series exists between these franchises and the Senators, bet on not the Senators. But again, the Senators have not been in the playoffs since 2017. So they're trying to make that improvement and get over that hump and get back into the playoffs. I'm not sure if they get back there, but they're trying. Stanley Cup, of course, as I said, none for them. They did make the final in 2007. There were 11 for the original Ottawa Senators team. Their arena since 1996, it's changed names a few times. It's now the Canadian Tire Centre. The new building is going to happen. Definitely looks like LeBreton Flats is going to be the future home for their next arena. And that really solidifies things. There's been some discussion since the passing of Eugene Melnyk about what's going to happen. It passes along in trust, of course, to his family. Apologies, forgot I had the air conditioner on. So it passes along to his family, and there was discussion about could they sell it, what would happen. Well, I would say that with the LeBreton Flats deal, apparently, at that next stage, I don't think we're going to see any risk of this team being moved by a new owner, which is what the concern would be, right? So, their coaching history, they've already had 13 coaches in their history, starting with Rick Bowness, who coached 235 games for them at the start, and it ruined his win-loss record forever. 39 wins, 178 losses, and 18 ties. DJ Smith's their current coach. He's been behind the bench for 209 games, a record of 81, 104, and 24. And DJ Smith, it feels like, is going to get at least another year behind the bench. I say that knowing that a third of the league's coaches have been fired in the last couple of months, so eventually every coach gets fired. The first goal in the history of the franchise upon their return was at 26 seconds of the second period by Neil Brady in a 5-3 win over Montreal, which really made us think this team was going to be good. And then they only won 9 games the rest of the season. Most recent goal was at 18:15 of the third period. That was an empty netter by Austin Watson in a 4-2 win over the Philadelphia Flyers. So their first goal was in the win. Their most recent goal was in a win in seasons they didn't make the playoffs. Their all-time penalty minutes leader, Chris Neil, 2,522 points. That'd be great, right? Chris Neil, who had 2,522 penalty minutes, also coincidentally the same number of points he had in his career. You're welcome, Chris Neil. Their season records for goals, it has to be Danny Heatley with 50. He had 50 twice, 05-06 and 06-07. Spezza set the team record with 71 assists in 05-06, on a line with Heatley. That season of 06-07, Heatley sets a team record with 105 points. So while Heatley's kind of become a bit of a punchline to jokes here and there, really, Heatley had an incredible run with Ottawa, which sadly ended badly because just sometimes that happens with the Ottawa Senators, and some players tend to have nasty exits with certain teams. Their penalty minutes in a season record belongs to Mike Peluso, who had 318 in 92-93, which was their expansion year. Their wins leader, all-time, Lalime, set the record with 39 in the season of 02-03. Out of that 146, he has to be second on the all-time list. And then we get into draft picks. You know what? Ottawa drafts pretty well. Ottawa does pretty well in the mid to late rounds. They are definitely a team to keep an eye on. This draft is seen as unspectacular but deep. It's the kind of draft where Ottawa's going to get somebody in a mid to late round that we're going to look back 4 years from now and say, wow, really good pickup. So 1994, drafting at 133rd, they drafted Daniel Alfredson, the number 1 scorer all time for the team. Not bad. Number 227 in 1993 was Pavel Demitra. 2010, the number 178 pick was Mark Stone. In 2009, the number 130 pick was Mike Hoffman. The number 239 pick in 1996 was Sami Salo. The number 96 pick in 2011 was J.G. Pajot. The number 121 pick in 2017, so a more recent example, is Drake Batherson. And the number 291 pick in 2003, so a pick that no longer exists. You don't draft till 291st. Brian Elliott was the pick, and of course Elliott's still playing, and that's out of the 03 draft. So while a lot of 03 guys are retiring, Elliott's got another year in Tampa Bay coming up. Now, first-round picks that didn't play a minimum of 100 games, it's actually a pretty small list for Ottawa. Number 15 in 1998 was Matthew Chenard, a goaltender, only played 1 game in the NHL. Number 16 pick in 2002 was Jakob Klepish, who only played 66 games in the NHL. Number 29 in 2007 was Jim O'Brien. He played 77 NHL games. And in 2011, drafted 24th overall, was Matt Pumple. 87 games in the career of Matt Pumple. As fun as it is to say Pumple, I've had no reason to say it since the channel started, really until now. So, yeah, there you go. They've done pretty well at the draft table. The issue for Ottawa in recent years has been being able to get guys to stick around, get those veterans to stick around. And now that they've got a really good young core, now you need to convince that young core to stay together and build around it. And if they do, then the next time I talk about this, we'll have some playoffs to talk about for the Ottawa Senators. So, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.